Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the Softears Studio 4. This is an all-new 4-balanced armature IEM coming in at $450. And you might be tempted to think, 4 balanced armatures, studio tuning sounds boring and sterile. But I gotta say up front, I frankly think this is one of the most fun sounding IEMs at its price point. And for the past couple of weeks, I've been living with the Studio 4 and comparing it to some other IEMs like it, just to see how it stacks up in kind of totality in all categories. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're here now live and you have any questions about the Studio 4 or anything else that we talk about, please leave it in the live chat. At the end of the review, we'll spend some good old-fashioned one-on-one time or one-on-many time, and hopefully it can answer all your burning questions about the Studio 4. But with that out of the way, I guess a quick shout out to Shenzhen Audio for sending this in for review. I've got them linked in the description down below if you want to check out the Studio 4. But for now, let's just dive to the table and start talking about, we'll start with the physical stuff. We'll see what's inside the box. Then we'll get into talking about the sound, specifically on the Studio 4, and then we'll bring in some competitors just so you can kind of see head-to-head how this thing stacks up in a number of ways. So, like I typically do, I'll start with the packaging and what you get inside the box. This is the box. It is actually really quite simple, especially for a $450 IEM, but it has got Studio in the name. And a couple of things about it kind of indicate that this really is intended for studio purposes, but again, I think it's really kind of a lot of fun as just an audiophile or a music listener. But anyway, I digress for now. Let's talk about what's in here. You get this little pelican looking case. It actually claims to be waterproof, which is interesting. So it makes me wonder if it's actually an official pelican case, but it is not branded or anything like that. It's kind of a neat little touch. It even comes with a wrist strap in case you get lost if you go, I don't know, river rafting with your Studio 4. I didn't do that personally, but if you did, I think that you would maybe be safe. Apart from that, of course, you get a set of ear tips, and these ear tips appear to be the same ear tips that come with the Moondrop Blessing 2, because Softears is in fact a kind of like a sister company to Moondrop, so they share a lot of accessories, and these tips appear to be the same ones that you've seen on some other IEMs. Interesting that they didn't come with Softears' own UC tips, they're ultra clear tips, but neither here nor there. It does also come with a little cleaning brush because this is for studio professional work. And I guess also worth pointing out that the earpieces come in these little individually wrapped packages. It's kind of a nice touch, I suppose, but frankly not something I would use day to day. Just a little bit too fiddly for me. The one thing I wanted to call out here, I guess I'll mention it does come with a microfiber cloth, but the one thing I did want to call out briefly is that the one that was sent to me came with this, which is basically a 3.5 millimeter cable extension. You see, you can plug the Studio 4 into this end, and then here at the other end you've got another 3.5 millimeter connector, and it comes with a 6.3 millimeter adapter so that you could ostensibly use this for studio work. It makes sense why this exists, why this comes with it, but for me, it came outside of the package, and when I looked at the listing on Shenzhen Audio, it didn't seem to indicate that that was necessarily coming with it, but it also didn't sell that separately. So whether or not you get that with your package, frankly, I don't know. But it is nonetheless, I guess, a nice touch, but something that personally I'm not going to be using. That said, this is the business end, and this is, of course, what I will be using, and this is the IEM itself and the cable, so we can get into talking about the build quality and the physical stuff in this thing. So, first of all, just this cable appears to be the same cable that came with the Softears volume. Generally, I actually really like this cable. It's just a simple black cable. Nothing fancy about it, but as you can see, the behavior on it is really nice. It has no memory. It does have a slight braid to it, but it is relatively thin, which I think is good, especially for professional application. You really don't want like a big bulky cable getting in the way of anything. And this is generally actually one of my favorite cables. Just no fuss, lightweight. I dig it. It's got a relatively small Y-split, as you can see here, but it does have one, I think, glaring omission. There's no chin cinch on this cable. I've installed my own. This is just a silicone O-ring that I put on a number of cables where I would like a chin cinch, and this is an example of a cable where I would like a chin cinch, and unfortunately, there was none built in. It certainly would be a nice touch to add. There are, of course, ear hooks built in, which is pretty typical of IEM cables here, and you've of course got your standard 2-pin connectors. They are slightly recessed, but not significantly recessed, just enough to give it a little bit of added stability on the cable. Apart from that, not much to say about the cable, but that will bring us to talking about the earpieces themselves, which I gotta say, this is like a super simple IM, right? This is just an all black aesthetic, kind of a piano black color, but there's something a little bit charming about it. I don't know, is it weird that it's rare to have just an all black IM like this, especially at this price point, and especially with a build quality that's this nice? I really dig it. The nozzles I will call out a little bit they don't have a lip on them. So if you're wearing certain ear tips, and it is like a smooth nozzle, certain ear tips won't hold on super well. But frankly, there had no problem with a number of ear tips that I tried, including these. These are Asla Sednas. You can see I'm not using the stock ear tips, but that's just because I kind of advocate generally. There's nothing wrong with stock ear tips, but the chance that the stock ear tip is going to be necessarily the right ear tip for you, well, in my experience, is kind of low. Not that stock ear tips are bad. Again, it's just I like to roll different tips and make sure I'm getting the right fit for me. And for me, having somewhat of a shorter ear tip here, like the Aslas, these can fit a little bit more snug onto, or a little bit further down on the nozzle. That helped out for me. The shell size, I would describe as kind of a medium shell size. It is, of course, as you can see, kind of a semi-custom shape. And another thing that I will call out about this IM right now is that this is an unvented balanced armature IM, which is to say there's no like external venting on this thing, right? Which means when you plug this thing in your ears, there is going to be, you know, pressure buildup. And again, I described this when I was talking about the Kiwi Ears Orchestra. I really don't have any problems with unvented IMs most of the time, and this is an example. I don't mind at all that this thing is unvented. In fact, the benefit of it being unvented is just that the sound isolation on this thing is actually quite strong. I would say is much above average. If that's a selling point for you, then there you go. For me, I actually don't really care too much about it being well isolating, because mostly I'm just using this thing around the house. But nonetheless, I do appreciate it for what it is. I guess I will give you quickly a fit demonstration of this IM, and as you might be able to guess, it fits me quite well. As I mentioned, it's kind of a semi-custom shape. Plugs in there. You can see it's, I would say, a medium size. It's not especially large, but it's also not super small. But it fits nice and flush against my ear, which I dig. And then the fit security is expectedly really, really good. Let's see, what would I say? Maybe if I'm nitpicking a little bit, the nozzle stability inside my ear isn't as stable as something like, let's say, the Kiwi Ears Orchestra or the Dunu SA6. Your mileage may vary on that. That all really will come down to your particular ear anatomy. But for me, that just meant that if I press on it from this angle, I can break the seal fairly easily. But from all other angles, it is super stable. And I don't know, that only really comes into play when I'm sleeping in this IM. And this is an IM that I was able to sleep through the night wearing. And that was something that, frankly, I did multiple times, because this is actually a pretty nice IM for that purpose. Okay, that is the physical stuff out of the way. Let me roadie wrap this thing into position, punch it on this thing, and let's start talking about the sound here on the Softears Studio 4, which, as the name suggests, and kind of alluded to already, Studio, it is ostensibly tuned neutral for studio use. And frankly, if that's your impression from the naming, you're not going to be far off, honestly. I think that this sound signature is effectively neutral with a sub-bass boost. It is maybe a little bit lean in the lower mid-range. If you're, familiar with a Harman scoop in the lower mid-range, it's kind of like that, but maybe like 20% of the typical Harman scoop. So it's just maybe a little bit lean in the lower mids, but not overly lean. And I think because of that, you've got that neutral tune. The bass boost is entirely focused on the sub bass, and the treble extends really well. Overall, it does come across a little bit on the bright side, and kind of just a lively sound signature, right? So if you're looking for something that's like warm, laid back, and thick, that is not what the Studio 4 is. If you're looking for something that's lively and neutral and clean and analytical, well, I think the Studio 4 kind of hits those on the head. So what do I like about the sound here on the Softears Studio 4? And frankly, if you know my preferences, that tuning that I just described is basically my preferences. I really, really like the tuning. I think the tuning on this, frankly, is quite stellar. Obviously, I'm somewhat biased. If you've seen my target frequency response and you've seen the Studio 4 laid on top of it, it's very, very close to hitting my target frequency response, which again, just gives you that kind of lively, energetic sound. It's got a vocal focus to it, which is what I like. Other reasons I really like this tuning in general is that it lends itself towards having a really good sense of separation between instruments. And I think that's a thing that the Studio 4, frankly, does really, really well. And in fact, I would say the Studio 4 does this exceptionally well. It has a very wide stereo image on it, just excellent imaging and positioning all around, and kind of just gives you that sense of sound. Again, it depends on the music you're listening to, but it really does give me that sense that the sound is dancing around my head. You get, you know, all that positional stuff, and again, that wide stereo separation really do contribute to that effect. And while I did describe this thing as, you know, somewhat of a bright IM, I think the treble on this thing is just really clean and smooth. It's kind of up there, frankly, with something like the Moondrop S8 in terms of its treble smoothness. So while it is somewhat on the bright side, I think this thing is never fatiguing, never sharp, never sibilant or anything like that. This thing is just a really, really good performing treble. I mean, it's not quite as resolving as something like the Moondrop S8, but that is an IM that costs, I don't know, not quite twice as much, but getting pretty close to that. And then the last thing that I'll talk about the sound, or what I love about the sound here, is the bass is actually really pretty good. Yes, it is balanced armature bass, but it is surprisingly satisfying and sturdy when it hits. In fact, I was listening to this thing before I was able to measure it, just spending some time listening to it and trying to figure out like what would the frequency response be when I graphed it. I actually expected this thing would graph with more bass than what it graphs, especially given the fact that this thing is balanced armature bass, and usually it's kind of the opposite, where a balanced armature bass will graph with a little bit more bass than you hear. I think the Softears Studio 4 actually kind of does the reverse. There is maybe a little bit of leanness in the upper bass, but apart from, you know, giving it kind of a clean tonality, I really don't think it comes across obviously in terms of bass quality, right? It doesn't really lack for attack on the bass. So that's what I really like about the sound here on the Studio 4. But of course, I got to nitpick. There's going to be some things I don't love about the sound. But frankly, there's not a lot, okay? If I'm being picky, I would say that the sound on the Studio 4 is not the most textured of sound, right? Just kind of, you know, if you're familiar with balanced armatures and balanced armature timbre, I think that the Studio 4 indexes a little bit high on the BA timbre. It's not bad per se, but it just does have somewhat of an artificial quality to it. If you're listening to a lot of, you know, music that's got vocal content or like guitar string pulls and maybe like a real analog sense to its recording, the Studio 4 is not the IM that's going to necessarily bring out those micro contrast details. It's more, I don't know, I think it's a little bit more suited towards pop production, but not bad at all. And then I guess I'll also say, again, if I'm being nitpicky, it is not the most bodied of sounds. Again, I mentioned it's a little bit lean in the lower mid-range, so if you're looking for thick note weight, I would look elsewhere, but frankly, that's really about it. So honestly, this is a lot of fun as an IM, and I probably even, I don't know, I just gushed about the imaging and like the stereo separation, and I feel like I still somewhat undersold it a little bit. But let's talk about how this IM compares with some others like it by pulling in some competitors. Let me make some room on my table, and let's talk about how the Studio 4 compares to a couple of other all balanced or balanced armature IMs at roughly the same price. I mean, I gotta say, this price range, there's actually a bit of a spread in the price just because there's not a lot of IMs in the $300 to $500 price range, right? It's not nearly as populated as something like the $200 price range. So we've got instead some IMs that range from 250 bucks up to, I think, 600 bucks. And let's go through them. All right, so of course we've got the Softears Studio 4. We just got done talking about this, 450 bucks, and this is for balanced armatures. We've also got the Dunu SA6, which, as the name suggests, is 6 balanced armatures, and the price on this one is coming in at 550 bucks, so 100 bucks more. We've got, of course, the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite, which I recently reviewed on the channel. This one's only 250 bucks, but it's got 8 balanced armatures. And then finally, We've got the Symphonium Meteor, which is also 4 balanced armatures, and this one's coming in at $600. So you can see, again, a little bit of a spread in terms of price range, but all kind of within the same category. I feel like if you are shopping for one of these, you should definitely consider the others and just think about what's going to work best for you, because frankly, I love all of these IMs, but let's talk about how they are different. So in terms of sound signature, again, we just got done talking about the Softears Studio4. This is somewhat of a lean neutral with a sub bass boost. Comes across a little bit bright and lively, but that is the general sound signature. It is basically just a neutral tuned IM. Over here with the Dunu SA6, I would actually describe this as a little bit more warm of a neutral sound signature. It's also got a sub bass boost, but it's just got a little bit more midsy sounding, whereas this is maybe a little bit more trebly sounding, and less bright, a little bit more laid back here on the SA6. The Orchestra Lite, I would say, is even more kind of warm and laid back versus the SA6. It's got, again, a bass boost, mostly sub-bass focused, but a little bit more pushed up toward the mid-bass than either of these two. So it does sound a little bit thicker and a little bit more body in the lower mid-range, and frankly, just more relaxed treble versus either of these two. And then finally, we've got the Symphonium Meteor here, which is the most different of the bunch. Whereas these I would describe as, again, kind of a lean, bright neutral, warm neutral, warmer neutral. This, I could maybe call this still a neutral, but this is just like bassy, thick, and warm neutral. The mids are like mid-range. I mean, like the vocals are a little bit on the pulled back side, but it's got really good treble extension, which gives it a bit of contrast. But overall, it just really does come across as very, very warm, which is usually not my thing, but I really do like the unique tune on this thing. It's just really, really well executed. So that is why I would recommend this IM to people who are looking for that kind of sound. Now, how do they compare in terms of technical performance? Well, this is where it gets a little bit more subjective and certainly down to preferences, but I really do think that where the Studio 4 excels is in that wide stereo image. It's just got an exaggerated sense of separation that really does make it a lot of fun with music that is well recorded and has the instruments really well delineated. It just kind of, again, dances around my head, which I dig. I think the bass impact is really quite nice in this as well. The treble is very smooth, and my only nitpick in the terms of the technical performance on the set is just that it's not the most textured, right? If you're looking for that micro contrast, textural quality of music, it's not the strongest here. It's a little bit on the balanced armature side, which is an interesting contrast to the Dunu SA6 up here, which I think has really, really good texture for a balanced armature set. In fact, I would say this is the best textured set here on the table. And that lends itself to just kind of having the most natural timbre. I think that imaging is actually also really solid on the set. Not quite standout in the same way that it is on the Studio 4. And I do think that the bass can maybe be a little bit flat here on the on the SA6, which is interesting because on a graph, it actually graphs bassier than the Studio 4, but I really do think that the Studio 4 bass hits just a lot better and more satisfying. But really what this thing is all about is just that mid-range detail and texturing, which it does really, really quite well with, again, a very solid and satisfying sense of imaging. Here with the Kiwi Ears Orchestra, I would say of the bunch here on the table, this one's probably the least sense of like separation between the sounds. It's maybe more cohesive, again, is a positive spin you could put on that, and some people definitely do like that. But it doesn't give you quite that same sense of sound dancing around your head that the Studio 4 does. What this thing does do, however, is it's got, again, a really nice bass curve on it that has just a nice sense of body that both of these, lack in the bass. Again, this one will hit pretty good in the bass, but it still doesn't have that weight behind it in sort of the upper bass, lower mid-range area, where I do think the Kiwi Ears Orchestra is a little bit better. It's not as textured as something like the SA6, but it is less balanced armature, less smoothed over as the Studio 4, so maybe somewhat of a balance in between. And finally, that will leave us with the Symphonium Meteor, which, again, tuning-wise, this is the most different here on the table. I would say that separation-wise, it's kind of similar to the Kiwi Ears Orchestra. Again, it's not the most cleanly delineated between sounds, right? So if you're looking for that real clear separation between sounds and that really clear positional stuff, I think the Studio 4 and the SA6 do a better job. But what I think the Meteor does better than the Kiwi ears is it gives a bigger head stage presentation, at least for me, which I dig. I think also what's really good here about the Meteor is it's just got a really good texture. And that, a lot of it, I think, just comes down to the treble performance on this, which has got a satisfying snappiness to it without being sharp or fatiguing. And I really do think that is kind of the highlight of this IM. Again, this is the tune that I don't typically gravitate toward, but the treble performance on it is just like so satisfying that I really dig the Meteor. And then finally, let's compare them quickly in terms of form factor, and we'll punch on them. Those were words as I talk about them, and I'll try and clean this one off because it is piano black and prone to fingerprints. But aesthetically, you know, it's plain in a surprisingly rare way. I dig it, actually. The medium shells fit me nice. You know, maybe not the best fitting IM here on the table for me, but it's, I don't know. I don't have very serious complaints about it. And then again, I will point out that this is an unvented design, which does make for good isolation, but might be uncomfortable for people who are not used to it. Maybe even some people who have tried to get used to an unvented IM and just know that that pressure buildup is not something they can deal with. Be warned that the Studio 4 does that. Again, for me, not a problem. The Dunu SA6 in comparison, I think the build quality on this thing is frankly just pretty exquisite. You've got these nice solid clear shells. You can see into them and see the drivers. It's a little bit of a smoked color, so it's not super obvious, but you can see them. And then they've got these stabilized wood faceplates, which frankly I think are really, really pretty handsome. I think this one's the more handsome one. But yeah, really, really nice build. And it's also got a really nice cable on it with Dunu's classic swappable terminations. The fit on this thing is actually a little bit smaller for me than the Studio 4. I would say this is kind of a medium small fit. And for me, that means this thing is just ultra comfy, and also ultra stable and fitting in my ear. This IM is vented. You can see up here, there is a little bit of a vent. So this one is not nearly as prone to pressure buildup in the ear. But because of that, I would say sound isolation on this thing is not as strong as the Studio 4, if that's important for you. Again, not a big priority for me, but even if you know it's important for you, there you go. The Kiwi Ears Orchestra. I love the clear shells in this thing. In fact, even here on camera, you should be able to see all those balanced armatures shining through it. It is a nice solid shell. It gives it like this glass-like look as you look through it, and I really, really do quite dig that. The outer faceplates are, I like the green, but I do think the logo is maybe a little bit too much, especially having it on both sides. So maybe a minor quibble in terms of the aesthetic, but I do think that that would look a little bit better if they toned down the logo or maybe came up with a more graphic presentation of it or something like that. I don't know, maybe I'm being nitpicky. And the fit on this IM honestly is just about perfect for me. I would say that this fits maybe slightly larger than the SA6 and about the same size for me as the Studio 4, but I would say this actually fits my ear a little bit better than the Studio 4. It's maybe a little bit thicker and chonkier here in sort of the depth, but in terms of how much space it takes up in my concha, I would say it is comparable, and then the fit security on it is just excellent. But again, I will highlight that this is an unvented IM, so sound isolation, very, very strong here on the Kiwi Ears Orchestra. But if you are sensitive to that pressure buildup, just note that this will give you that pressure feeling. And then finally, the Symphonium Meteor. To be honest, I don't love the aesthetic on this IM. I would say that this is my least favorite in terms of aesthetic. I mean, the shells are nice and small, and I like the all-metal build on them. And mostly it just comes down to this graphic design that they've put on the outer shell that just does not show up great on camera. And frankly, in person, it also doesn't really look that great. But getting a little bit nitpicky. In terms of fit, these are, I would say, the smallest of the bunch here on the table, but they're also not like a semi-custom shape IM, so it also fits in my ear, maybe the loosest. It's not like the most stable, but honestly don't really have any problems with it. I really do like the fit of these IMs, and again, this is another IM I've been able to sleep well with, even though the stability for me does really rely on getting a nice stable fit with the ear tip. And for me, here I'm using JVC's spiral dots because they've got kind of like this ballooning umbrella shape that works well for me with this type of IM. I will also say that this seems to be also an unvented IM, but I think this is the one that is least likely to cause problems for people who are sensitive to that pressure buildup, partly because it's just not a deep fitting IM, partly because it is not like a custom fit, so it doesn't create that same sense of seal inside my ear. And I think it also doesn't give me quite the same isolation that I would get on these two IMs. They're unvented, but I don't know, again, neither of those are necessarily priorities for me. So I think that is going to do it for my thoughts here on the Softears Studio4. I haven't given it a score yet, so let's do that now. Out of 5 stars, I'm gonna give the Softears Studio4 a very, very solid 4 stars out of 5. I just think, honestly, this is a really, really fun listen. And a lot of it comes down to that really wide stereo separation, that really distinct imaging that I like. And then it comes on top of a tuning that is almost exactly my target. Again, the only place where this is a little bit of what's not quite a 5 is it just lacks a little bit of sense of texture. But again, with like pop recordings that don't have a lot of texture in them anyway, it's not really any loss. And this ends up being one of the most fun IMs that I've got in my collection. If you're interested in checking it out, well, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you found this review helpful, you liked it, you're having a good time here on a Sunday evening, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and join me on Discord. I've got that linked in the description as well. And then I'll catch you on the next super review, unless you're here live, in which case hang out, and after this brief message, we'll have a chat.